Chapter 15. Rory tossed and turned as the familiar dream returned. "Mummy, where are you? I can't see you. It's hard to breathe. Please come help me." Her childlike mind filled with fear, and she woke up with a scream, and she sat up straight in bed as panic flooded her. Smoke filled the room, and she could hardly breathe. Scurrying off her bed, she ran as fast as her little legs could carry her out of her bedroom and into the hallway. "Daddy, where are you?" Her hands shook, and her fingers trailed along the wall that led to her parents' bedroom. Fits of coughing soon followed, and she struggled to breathe. Where was Mummy? Why wasn't Daddy answering her? How come she could hardly breathe? She called again, only no one answered. Sweat formed on her forehead as heat and flashes of fire spewed from the big crack in the door. She was about to touch the doorknob when someone grabbed her by the shoulders. Rory woke up screaming. Disoriented, she sat up in bed. Soon she realized she'd had another one of her nightmares. But why did she smell smoke? Suddenly she started coughing until her shoulders shook. Her eyes watered. She could hardly breathe. Smoke flooded her bedroom. A faint barking came from outside her window. Why were her dogs outside? Rory was sure they had been in her room when she fell asleep last night. Without warning, a woman's loud cackle-like laughter echoed off the walls. "Your Mummy and Daddy aren't going to save you this time, Princess. In fact, no one is." A deep, grainy voice uttered a threat that sounded like a death knell in Rory's ears. Fear coiled in her belly at the woman's words. She rubbed her eyes, straining to see who was speaking, but it was no use. She couldn't see anything in the dark, smoke-filled room. "Who are you? What do you want with me?" Rory could hear the quiver of fear in her own voice. "My darling girl, don't you remember me? I'm your dear Aunt Mel." Her laugh was reckless and bawdy. "Of course your mother never approved of me. I know that because she hardly ever invited me to any of your birthday parties." Rory was silent for a moment. Then she remembered. The bracelet, she'd found it last night. An intuitive feeling told her that Aunt Mel had been on the island, but Rory never expected her aunt to try to harm her. "Aunt Mel, you're here. I remember you used to stop by and read to me. I was about 4, I think." Rory spoke of fond memories without thinking. "Yes, silly me. That was fun for a time. But then my sister, your mother, said I complained too much when I came to visit, so she stopped inviting me. But it especially made me angry when your mother stopped inviting me to your birthday parties. Suddenly I was no longer part of the family. You, their only princess, was more important. No longer was I valued. No longer did I belong." "That's not true, Aunt Mel." Her aunt screeched at her. "It was true." Suddenly her voice went eerily soft. "But I took care of things myself when I showed up to your 6th birthday party anyway." "How come I don't remember seeing you that night, Aunt Mel?" Rory's 6th birthday party was quite vivid in her mind. For some reason, her Aunt Mel's red hair and green eyes didn't come back to her memory. "That's because I snuck in by the back door. I was hiding in your dad's office. You see, I was very sneaky." Her aunt's voice lilted upwards in a childish way as she giggled at her own cleverness. "I watched from the crack in the door, and I saw you blow out your candles. I even saw when your mum put your grandmother's gold heart-shaped locket around your neck." Aunt Mel's voice suddenly switched to anger. "That locket was supposed to be mine, my necklace from my mother. It matched my bracelet. I earned it when I took all the beatings from our drunken father. It should have been mine, but no, your grandmother decided to give it to Delaney instead of me. Then, for your 6th birthday, your mother decided to give it to you." Rory's hands gripped the locket around her neck, her hands shaking. She looked fondly back on that time when her mom placed the locket around her neck and held it as a treasured memory. There were pictures of Rory's dad and mum inside this heart-shaped pendant. All these years later, she still loved the feel of the locket hanging around her neck. It was a way of keeping the love of her parents close by her side throughout her childhood. Smoke increased in the room, and Rory released a hacking cough. Her Aunt Mel continued talking as if nothing had changed. But when I saw you were given the necklace, I decided it was my time to take control. And so I did. Aunt Mel laughed insanely. As soon as everyone went to bed, your parents stood on the balcony of their bedroom. I snuck in and lit candles and set the curtains on fire that covered the balcony door. Your parents were trapped. Rory let out an anguished cry. Why? Aunt Mallory, why did you do that? I loved my parents. Because they didn't treat me like family. They didn't give me those things I deserved. They didn't value me. So they deserved to be treated the same way they treated me, with disdain and cruelty. Aunt Mel's evil cackle echoed across the room. It was a long time before she became quiet. Footsteps approached the bed. So this time it's you who is doomed to die, Rory, but not before I get what I came for. Without warning, Rory felt long, cold fingers reach for her. They fumbled until they came to her neck. With a sudden jerk, Rory felt the necklace around her neck snap in two. I have it now. It's now forever mine. Besides, you won't need it where you're going. The woman's cold, calculated laugh sent terror through Rory's veins. Hysterical laughter echoed through her bedroom and down the hallway as Aunt Mel walked away. Scrambling off the bed, Rory tried to find her way to the door through the thick haze of smoke. Her whole body was shivering, trembling, and quaking. Heat from the fire pelted her skin like thousands of tiny rocks, hitting her all at once. Darkness surrounded her except for the orange-red glow of light from the fire. All she could think of as smoke and heat increased in the room was that she'd lost everything she ever wanted. Tears fell down her cheeks, mixing unheeded with the smoke and fire that surrounded her. First she'd lost her parents, who both died, leaving her alone. Then she'd found out she had a half-brother, who did his best to scare her, and an aunt who hated her enough to kill her. But the last loss was the most devastating, losing Gabe. He might have rescued her with a marriage promise, but she had grown to love him. Now she realized her love had blindsided her to the truth. She really was someone who wasn't worthy to be Gabe's wife. Her husband might even believe that he started to feel something more for her now, but time would prove him wrong. Within a few short weeks, her husband would regret that he'd married her. But now it looked like it no longer mattered. It was too late for her dreams. It was too late for her marriage. It was too late for her to be loved. Rory barely made it a few steps before she collapsed and lay still. Memories of reaching out for her parents in that smoke-filled hallway when she was a little girl came back to her before the darkness closed in. Pouring rain peppered Gabe's skin as he hurried down the steps of his private jet. He could hardly see his way clear as he ran down the trail that led to the lodge. He'd already called the emergency dispatch number. The police, ambulance, and firefighters were on their way. As he got closer to their home, he saw an orange-red glow from the windows, with flames licking their corners. Please, God, let me save my wife in time. I love her. I want her to live. I want to have her by my side. Rushing through the kitchen door, he hurried up the stairs. The fire was raging from his bedroom and out into the hallway. It was impossible to get through that way. Gabe rushed outside and grabbed a ladder from the shed. With hurried movements, he set it against the wall near the window to Rory's bedroom. Using a hammer, he smashed the glass on the window, careful to make sure all the glass along the window pane was crushed. He scurried up and inside Rory's bedroom. A thick haze of smoke filled the room, and he could hardly breathe. Climbing down from the window, he couldn't see anything in the smoke-filled room. Gabe stretched out his hands in the dark to find Rory. He searched the bed, but she wasn't there. Next, he got on the floor and crawled on his hands and knees, determined to find his wife. Suddenly he reached out, touching something soft. His wife lay there. Rory, can you hear me? Gabe leaned down to talk to her, but all was silent. His wife lay motionless. Gabe needed to get her out of here, fast. He lay his wife over his shoulder, and he climbed through the window, holding her tight so she wouldn't fall. He stepped down the ladder and finally reached the ground. He hurried over to the guest cottage where their cook lived. He needed to get Rory out of the rain to help her. Mrs. O'Toole answered the door as soon as he knocked. Seeing that he carried Rory, she hurried to open the door. "Lay her on my bed, Mr. Stevenson. The poor lassie. We need to get her better." Gabe gently lay Rory down on the bed. She was white as a sheet. He heard the sounds of the helicopter landing on the island. "Mrs. O'Toole, I just heard the emergency helicopter. Would you go tell the emergency crew that Rory needs immediate care?" Gabe turned to her, and the older woman nodded, quickly slipping on her shoes and hurrying out the door. Turning quickly to Rory, Gabe remembered what he'd learned from his first aid training years ago. He slid 2 fingers to the side of her neck and could feel a faint but steady pulse. Leaning down, he listened for her breathing, but only heard shallow breaths. She still wasn't moving, so he tilted her head back, closed her nose with 2 fingers, and opened her mouth. Setting his lips to hers, he breathed oxygen into her lungs. Gabe puffed 2 quick breaths into her mouth and checked her. It was only after he repeated the process 2 more times that Rory inhaled a deep breath. "Rory, you're awake." Gabe ground out her name as though in torment, and reached for his wife, hauling her into his arms with the force of his need. All the pent-up fears and worries came suddenly crashing down on Gabe. "I thought I'd lost you, Rory. I nearly went mad with fear." Aunt Mal, set the fire." Rory breathed out, tears running down her cheeks. "I know, my darling. I'm so sorry." Gabe kissed the top of her head, his arms trembling from the weight of the crushing fear they both had been through. "I shouldn't have left you alone." "You're back, Gabe. You can't be back. You'll miss that speaking commitment." Rory coughed for a long time, trying to clear her airways. Gabe helped her sip some water. "I care more about you than some speaking engagement, Rory. I'm just so thankful you're alive." He leaned his forehead on hers and sighed heavily. "Does that mean you forgive me for pulling away and being so distant from you?" Rory's large violet eyes were tear-filled and solemn. "Of course I forgive you, Rory. I'm just glad you're alive." Gabe swallowed back the emotion that threatened to consume him. He pulled her onto his lap, raining kisses on her eyelids and cheeks. "I finally realized today, when I nearly lost you, how much you mean to me." His chest heaved and his eyes closed, trying to shut out the vivid images of the fire burning up his home, convinced Rory had died. Gabe's hands stroked her hair as he released jagged breaths. He kissed her forehead once more. "Heaven help me, Rory, but when I realized your Aunt Mal meant to harm you, I couldn't get to you fast enough." Gabe looked deeply into his wife's eyes, and expelling a shaky breath, he shut his eyes for a brief moment. Rory cried softly into her husband's shoulder, her arms encircling his neck. His hand moved in gentle circles along her back. "I'm so happy you came back for me, Gabe. You didn't abandon me." Rory whispered, a sudden sob escaping, as relief flooded her that he didn't leave her for good. "I won't ever abandon you, my beautiful wife." Gabe kissed the top of her head, cradling her close. "Gabe, thank you for rescuing me." Rory whispered, her mouth so close to his that their breaths mingled. Rory pulled away so she could look into his eyes. She reached a hand up and touched his cheek, studying her husband's haunted eyes. Gabe nodded, his eyes pained, refusing to leave her face. Then ever so slowly, almost as if he expected her to pull away, her husband lowered his head, bringing his lips closer to hers. "I can't stand the thought of losing you, Rory. I'd rather die myself." Rory turned her face to accept his kiss, unable to deny him anything. Shaky hands tangled suddenly in her thick blonde hair, holding her captive. His lips ravaged hers with an intensity that brought her senses reeling. Nothing mattered in this moment except the warmth of her husband's touch. A fierce tenderness rose up on the inside as Rory fervently fed his need. Gabe's heartfelt whisper caused her to come undone. "My sweet Rory, I love you. I love you so much. I can't bear to lose you." "You won't lose me, Gabe. I'm here. I'm here. You saved me." Her body molded to her husband's, and she offered her lips to his loving mastery. Over and over he kissed her until she was breathless. Rory's arms reached up, encircling his neck, drawing him closer. It was this deep devotion that she'd longed for from the start. Her heart sang at the realization that her husband needed her. Gabe pulled his mouth from hers with a low moan, as if unwilling to part from her for one moment. His strong arms cradled her close to his chest, and she could hear the rapid beating of his heart. A deep sense of happiness and contentment filled her. Her husband continued to stroke her hair, and Rory snuggled closer to his heart. Rory loved being held by him, but there was something even more powerful about the tender way he held her now. She sensed a deeper connection to Gabe, almost like their souls bonded in a way they hadn't before. Her husband had told her he'd become attached to her, but it was only now that she'd finally believed him. Rory swallowed back the emotion that threatened to consume her. They sat together in the stillness for a long time. She cherished this time of closeness with the man she loved. "I'm so sorry for the times that I pulled away from you, Rory. I was scared of being vulnerable to love. My heart was on the line, and I was afraid." Gabe's gruff whisper broke through the stillness of the moment. "I told you how I lost my father and my friend Billy, but I've finally realized that all that pain and heartache made me too afraid to love. A big part of that pain has been my fear of losing someone that I love again." Rory felt the weight of Gabe's sorrow in his words. "It's all right, Gabe." Rory tightened her grip around his waist, aware of how difficult it must be for him to speak of the death of his friend and father. Her husband tensed. "No, it's not okay, Rory. Don't you see? I don't want to hide from love. But I failed to truly love and protect my dad and Billy the way they needed me to. What if I fail you too? My heart couldn't take it if I lost you as well." Rory placed her hands on his cheeks and looked deeply into her husband's eyes. "Listen to me, Gabe. It wasn't your fault your friend decided to take the dare from the popular kids and dive that day. It wasn't your fault that your dad passed away from the heart attack." Rory moved back a little ways to study him, her own eyes cloudy with unshed tears. "But it was my fault. I've always felt responsible for both of their deaths." Gabe pressed his eyes shut, a harsh groan falling from his lips. "For years, the weight of their deaths has all but crushed me. I'm terrified that somehow I'll repeat the same mistakes with you. Because I love you so much that it scares me to live day after day in a world without you in it." He expelled a labored breath. "Which is why I've decided to do everything I can to change. But I might need your help, Rory. I want to be vulnerable and close to you. I want to spend a lifetime learning how to love you, my beautiful wife." A single tear slipped down her cheek. Her husband reached over and with gentle fingers wiped away her tears. Rory turned to look into her husband's eyes. "You love me, Gabe?" "Yes, very much. I think I fell in love with you when we went sailing together a couple weeks ago. It was so wonderful having you by my side that I longed to sail away and never look back. And it's also why I've been so bad-tempered all this time, as I've tried my best to push you away and ignore these feelings." Gabe ran a shaky hand through his hair and grimaced. "I'm sorry for that." Rory was thrilled to hear her husband's words of love. "I forgive you, Gabe. I love you with all my heart." Gabe pulled her closer and kissed her briefly. "I've been drawn to you from the first time I saw you. You're a woman who is warm, gentle, and kind. Someone who also happens to be selfless, beautiful, and very captivating." Her husband faltered on the last word as his eyes darkened and moved down to her lips. Rory swallowed back emotion at his words, forcing herself to meet his gaze. Her husband's whispered words mingled close to her lips. He kissed both of her eyelids, her cheeks, and her nose before he spoke. "I want to ask you something, Rory." "What is it, Gabe?" she asked, breathless. "When we first married, we agreed this would be a fake marriage. Now the tide has shifted, and we've fallen in love." Gabe leaned his forehead against hers, his eyes squeezing shut, a hesitation in his voice. "Would you mind being married for real to a rogue like me?" Rory let out the breath she'd been holding, while the corners of her mouth turned up with an invitation on her lips. Her husband's fierce love for her, coupled with his need to have her as his forever wife, was the most compelling reason to make this marriage real. Gabe, you're not a rogue. You're the man I love. You've rescued me. You've trusted me with the most vulnerable part of yourself, and you've honored me by loving me. More than anything, I would be happy to be your wife in every way." The tender passion she saw in his eyes caused a shiver to run up her spine. Her husband's lips touched her own with a sweet, reckless abandon. Gabe's arms tightened around her and embraced her close. His hands reached up to cradle her face, his large blue eyes darkening and searching hers, a hesitation in his movements. Rory reached up and brushed her lips against his, her kisses saying much more than words ever could. Gabe groaned, unable to wait a second longer. He folded her in his arms, kissing her with the hunger of a starved man. "Rory, my beautiful wife, you're mine forever. I love you." "And I love you too, Gabe." Rory's heart raced at her husband's passionate kisses. So many emotions rose up inside of her, and her heart overflowed with love.